Livecast with Scott Weiser. Now that I'm done directing the development and first episode of the second series at Space Station Animation, I'm joining up with Steamroller Animation to push the boundaries of the art form. Thanks to the support of so many of you, I'm continually developing more than 10 dynamic feature film pitches while mastering the art of telling deeply meaningful stories. Today we have Pietro Schito with us. Pietro is a writer in animation. One of the questions that I get that's the most difficult to answer is what's the pathway to become a writer? And so it's really great to have Pietro on. He started as an editor in Italy in Avid, and then he moved to the Film Academy in New York to study screenwriting and found later on a bustling animation community in Mexico where he has helped a couple directors write their films, and those directors were mentored by Guillermo del Toro. So really cool experiences that Pietro has had so far. And since this is a collaboration, Pietro's actually going to do an introduction for me and add anything that I left out.
So. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. And yeah, we have a portion of this on our YouTube channel. So I'm going to introduce you. Scott is an incredible director and writer, one of the most prolific creators I've met. I was really, really impressed, especially by the 10 pages that you can find on his webpage. I invite you to explore that because it's a lot of work. It's what I invite every writer to do, to really focus on creating more and more projects, building a portfolio. He's now at Steamroller, helping the team, supervising animation, and I bet his creative juice and flow has other things going on and working on other projects that he will announce soon. So for me, it's a pleasure to be here and chatting, and it's great to have this wonderful collaboration.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. That's a great intro. Thank you for your kind words. And it's, again, the reason I think that it's hard for us to tell somebody, okay, this is the direct pathway to animation, is because often writers in the past have kind of emerged from the team. So you'll have a group of story artists and they're all throwing ideas onto the wall and they're making the story. And then one of them just kind of becomes the writer, right? So in Pixar, it was Andrew Stanton who was the writer early on. But later on, Pixar did start bringing some writers from outside of the studio that they had seen doing prolific work outside in the industry, right? That was really great and they loved the work. So they brought them in-house to write. But that's still kind of a hard pathway. That means you have to get some successful films that are in live action before you can do animation, but you have a different approach. So you said you had 3 things that you think that people should focus on. Let's start there, and then we can go through your 11 points of actual writing and then any other questions that we think of along the way.
Yeah, I think that is a great question. It comes from my own experience was getting in love with the craft of animation before discovering writing. And when I was a little kid, I'm from Italy, so I was in Milan traveling to Rome on a train, and I saw 2 Disney animators. They were doing illustrations at that time for Tarzan, and I was it was amazing to see like the trade on the pen. So for a big part of my life, I wanted to be an artist and work for Disney and the things that I used to watch at the movie theater. And so, but it was until later when there was a screenwriter from Disney coming to my university, giving a series of like a workshop, very long workshop where we used to write comic books, and for Disney and for a preteen and teenager audience, and something very popular in Italy, a superhero. Donald Duck that not many people know about. It's very cool. And by the way, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is that it opened up a new reality for me. There are actually ways to tell a story, principles that you can follow that I had no idea that existed. I used to do video and like films and like our movies with my brothers with my parents' camera, and without any knowledge of storytelling and screenwriting. So when I discovered that, it was amazing. And at some point, I discovered I mean, drawing was not was always been a passion, but was not like what I wanted to do. I really wanted to focus on stories.
Makes sense.
And so I started working independently with animation projects, and then thanks to being able to learn more about writing at the New York Film Academy, then I started learning this harsh reality where it's really, really hard to get into an animation studio
Yes.
without an artistic background. And it's like I'm so passionate. What you describe about the early days at Pixar and this collaborative art form, which is animation, is exactly that, the collaboration of being in the same room, seeing the artist sketching something on a piece of paper, throwing an idea that is not just the writer in his or her cave writing and then submitting, and then you're not involved in anything else, and it's just your voice, and there is this magical connection that's created when you write something, and then the story artist brings it into pictures, and then you get to see make the story better.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the magic. And so the problem is that there's no space, there's not a specific space for us to become part of a film. You know, a big studio, they have a very limited amount of films, and so the standard way is write a lot, get an agent, then hopefully your agent is in connections with the studio. They send it to the development department, which is usually just a few people reading scripts, and then if you're selected among many, many scripts, then you're presented, for example, at Pixar, a director gets to see, I think it's three writers, and they give them samples, and then you have a meeting, and then you can finally get to write for one of these big studios.
Yeah.
That's one in a million. I mean, it's easier to win the
And
lottery.
that might be for one
And
feature film. That doesn't mean
and
you're a
one feature
staff
film.
writer. Yeah.
Exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah, it's only for one feature film. Then, of course, once you meet the team, and there are possibilities that emerge, of course, especially if you think about like a big studio like that. But at the same time, I think that there is another way, and I think that is. And I was chatting. We have a video on the YouTube channel with Jared Bush. Jared Bush,
Hmm.
the co-writer and co-director of Zootopia, Encanto, Moana, and more.
Yeah.
And he jokingly say that people have his art uh, at Disney on their walls as a joke, because he says that he's terrible at it, and that he definitely does not have a background in an artistic background.
Right.
And he's he became friend with Howard, the director, and that is what now getting to those three elements. I think that um, getting in touch on a personal level with people and creating meaningful connections, showing your passion, like because when we love animation, it's like something you can't just hold. Like
Yeah.
I'm an introvert, but I get passionate when I talk about the craft, because it's
Hmm.
really, really something magical. And so you start meeting people, producers, directors. There are a lot of people, they have a story, and there are a lot of artists that they have stories, but they don't know how to write. There are a lot of directors at studios that, or animation directors, supervisors, or people that in different capacities, they have stories, they don't have time to develop them. And so I encourage you to you get in touch with people. Even it's incredible, because I left the US and came from LA. I came back to Mexico,
Hmm.
and then I kind of felt like, here the industry is way smaller, and I was very like sad and worried about the future. And now I'm closer to Hollywood than when I was in LA, because I
Yeah.
found this local community. We'll get to that probably in a moment. But what I what I'm trying to say is that even if you're not in LA, if you're not close to the like a film industry, find your people, find your tribe where you're at, where you live, and connect with them. And all those three elements, these are, I think, are the foundation for any writing career. Uh, Specifically for animation, I would guess is like to create a habit of writing consistently. That's already half the battle. If
Yeah.
you're able to sit on the chair and write, and maybe not every day, it can be I write from Monday through Friday and leave my
Hmm.
weekend to
Oh, cool.
also for the family, but also to refresh and
And
have
recover. Yeah.
recover. Yeah. And then the second one, learn about the craft, because not
Oh,
knowing and not learning about the craft paralyzes you, or makes you, or even worse, makes you think that you know that this is just something that is a flaw, artistic flaw that will come from you, and it's not at all.
it's not. It's not. Yeah. That the
And the
craft
third
is
one,
one of
just
those things that I could just talk endlessly about, you know, and those are some of my favorite conversations is how you write a great organic story because it's one of the hardest things in the world to do, I think.
yeah.
And yeah, the more you learn, the more you realize you have to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You never finish. I remember this Disney guy. I see that in your background you have one of the most uh, famous books about screenwriting story. And when he,
Ah, yes.
the Disney screenwriter, gave it to us, and he said, "Yeah, read it, and then you have your whole life to understand it." And
Yes.
so
Yeah. And that's the storybook, right? Robert McKee's
the
story.
storybook, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Still,
that
still
one,
feels
it's
good.
dense. It's
And
dense. For
yeah,
sure. You go
yeah.
back and
I
you
always
read it.
suggest people to read Sitfield first, and then move to story later,
Yeah.
because anyway, yeah, it's something that you learn that those books are great, they are helpful, but then there's a totally different layer that you get a glimpse of at the beginning, but then it becomes ingrained, and you never stop learning, and
Yeah.
it's great to see wonderful films that you say, one day I want to write something as meaningful
Yeah.
as that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it is. One of my
The
favorite
third one is,
screenwriting gurus is Brian McDonald. I've had him on the show before, and he says that he compares being able to see great storytelling is Native Americans being able to see the footprints in the grass. And that would be big grass where it's like, you know, you step on it, it springs right back up, right? But
right.
they've trained because they know how to track animals and that sort of thing, and maybe enemies, I don't know, but they know how to see the footprints in the grass, and it's not an easy thing to see, but the more you do
Yeah.
it, the better you get at it. And it gets to the point where if a movie flops or falls flat, you can look at that movie and start to see, okay, what did they do right? What could have been better? You know, and you can start to solve problems a lot
Yeah.
faster. But to your point as well, it's going to take a while. You know, it takes practice and
Hmm.
practice and practice. It takes daily
Yeah.
writing and also daily analysis, you know, of being able to say,
Yes.
how is this
Both.
story? How can I make this story better? There's some films that I still am analyzing, and I feel like I've hit exactly what was maybe wrong with them or what could have been improved. And then I learned something new, you know, then I'm like, oh, actually it was even deeper of a problem than I realized. And so
Hmm.
that's really helpful as well.
Yeah. And then I think I love how, um, I love to nurture an attitude toward films that I don't like, or I see people that the flops, and then once you get to know people behind those movies, you
Yeah.
understand that they knew the same things that we know, and
Yes.
I would
Yes.
say, for me, they knew a lot more, and they're
Uh-huh.
sometimes in an environment where are surrounded by brilliant minds who created the most wonderful films. And so I think it's humbling, because you discover that there's no formula at all. There's never
Yeah.
like run away if somebody promises you a formula for screenwriting, and uh, and also nobody knows, and recognizing that is something that is it takes a lot of time, but also there's no guarantee. And so you and then again, as you said, what could have been better? That is the best attitude. And I
Hmm.
was telling with my team for the YouTube channels, we never criticize a film, and you can we
Yeah.
never, oh, this didn't work, not because, not just because we respect people in the industry, but it's also respect for the craft, and knowing how hard it is to create a story. And so, what can you learn when you see a film that didn't work for you? And some films, they have wonderful lessons, even if they were not great, because sometimes one portion, one element is not working, and then destroys everything else. But everything else was working well, and you can learn a lot from it. So I
Yeah.
love your attitude on that.
I had the co-founder of Walden Media that they did the Chronicles of Narnia series
Yeah, yeah.
and a bunch of amazing work, and I mentioned in a positive light Mr. McGorham's Wonder Emporium, and he said that I was one of the first people that he heard mention that film in a positive light, but it's because I had dug into that thing so much that I saw all the promise of what the film could have been, And I also saw that, with these a couple of ingredients, this is how it could have been better, but I didn't look at it as a flop. And
Totally.
similarly, like if it's a massive, $1 billion success, I don't look at it as a complete success. I look at it as a,
Hmm.
as a learning experience, an ability to look at somebody else's work, admire what they've done, and also think, how can we push it just a bit further, and make it better.
Yes, yes.
So yeah,
Yeah, and
awesome.
then you see, so, yeah, so especially I see people that get fired up when, especially if it's a series that you've been watching for years, and then the ending is not,
Oh yes.
you know, and yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, and yeah, and the third thing, going back to the three things, the third one is connecting with others. I think just to give them, I think this is one of the ways that once you do that is, and as we mentioned before, is like creating meaningful and real connection with people, and so on. Then then you have the three elements that are what you need for a screenwriting career. Because
Yeah.
if you don't write, then you can learn. And I used to be like that. I used to learn when you get in love with the craft. I got in love with the craft, and then start reading books and watching movies and analyzing, and then I wasn't writing, and then I started connecting with people. At the early days of Facebook, I used to contact people from Hollywood. It was crazy for me, from Milan, Italy. Oh, somebody's actually answering me, and I used to love the TV series Lost, so
Uh-huh.
I started finding in the credits all the writers from Lost, and get in touch with them, got to meet the creators, and almost like half as a fan and half as somebody trying to learn. And
Yeah.
I would get some great advice, but I realized later that I wasn't putting in the work to write every
Mm-hmm.
day and to create projects and build a
Yeah.
portfolio of things. And so you can have great connections, and you can learn and read about the craft, but it's like, okay, I'm gonna read a manual on how to play the piano and compose a wonderful symphony. Yeah, you
Yes.
can read all day long, but you will never, or just listen to music and to learn how to compose. That's not gonna work. You
Yeah.
need to write.
And I have been cautioned by a successful screenwriter who I think is one of the best in the industry, told me, beware of how much stock you put into a singular screenwriting book. Because a lot of these books, if you look at all the films they've written, there's like none. Just
Most
like
of them.
how much writing have they done? It's actually very hard to spot a great screenwriter. you know, Screenwriting
Yes,
is one of
yes.
those skills that's really hard to like prove to everybody you do great at it. I've written
Hmm.
several books and kickstarted them, and it still requires somebody to read the book for them to see. So that's an
Yes.
interesting conundrum that we can solve a later day. But yeah, so your three things were: write every day, learn about the craft passionately, and realize there's always something more to learn. And I like how you used the word connecting instead of networking, because I've been networked before, where somebody's coming up to just say, "Okay, I've got him," you know, I've got
Hmm.
him in my
Yeah,
list.
checklist.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'd rather somebody care about me and the work I do. And if
Hmm.
I'm connecting with somebody, I try to do that. I try to add value to what they're doing before I ask, something big like give me your secrets and
Yeah, yeah. I think it's, yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's, you realize, especially in animation, you will soon realize if you're starting out that this is a very small industry.
yeah.
Everybody knows each other,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about, as any industry, there are challenges. But I think that at the end of the day, it's all about like human connections, and
Yeah.
also animation is even more. I think in animation, it's even more important to find somebody that you can work well with,
It is
because
for how long it takes.
it takes a lot of time, and
Yeah.
and the writer uh, is involved, like for most of the process,
From the
like writing
beginning to the
takes,
end, yeah.
yeah, from the beginning. And that's what I love. I mean, collaborating specifically with directors is like this synergy and this way of back and forth of ideas, and so if you don't have a good relationship with them, then it's like, you're nobody's going to work with you because it's like, if you're a hard person to work with, it's going to be very hard, for everybody. So I think that's why, um, I think that's true in life. I don't believe in, it's the same way I don't believe in numbers in terms of followers and things that, like, if you, some people, I try to reach out to people when they follow the YouTube channel or the accounts on social media. I think a single personal relationship is way more important than having like a lot of people in your social media. It's like,
That is so true.
yeah. And so that's something I try to nurture, and try to find people that, because you will find, especially producers and people, that you need to be careful and understand, do they really love the craft, or is it something that they do among other things, and it's not, uh, they're not passionate about it.
Yes.
Because you can totally see if somebody is trying to, oh, let's get into the business of animation and make some money, or what is trendy right now. And it's really, I mean, I would suggest you still take the jobs if you're not working as a writer, if you're not getting your career is to find a gig as a writer. So I wouldn't say take anything, but if
Uh-huh.
it's something that resonates with you, then take it, even if the environment maybe it's not your ideal one. Because a lot of things start to happen when when you get paid and you get to work. First of all, there's this satisfaction that, wow, somebody's paying me to do
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
love to do. And so that is, but also you start having deadlines. You start having to have relate to present your stuff and defend your ideas, and also welcome new ideas. So it puts you in an environment that's very, very different from, okay, this is my brilliant idea for the
Yeah.
story. I'm gonna develop it and sell it, and everything will be perfect. So it puts you in that. It's also a great cure for writer's block because it's once you
Yes.
when you have a, I think it was Andrew Stanton that said the best cure for writer's block is a deadline.
Yeah.
So
And to just show up and write. My
yeah, show
son
up and
woke up
write.
today. He's like, I don't have any motivation. I was like, oh, motivation's overrated. you know,
Yes,
it's all about having
totally.
that process of, okay, I'm sitting down, I'm here, you know, and trying not to
Exactly.
procrastinate, when you do sit down and like, oh, I'm gonna go check
Hmm.
LinkedIn and Twitter
Yeah,
and
and
yeah,
it's nowadays is even harder.
yeah. Oh yeah, there's so many things that want to distract us. So focus is key. So let's go into your 11 points now of story
Yeah, I
structure
think
and
that I expanded that recently to 14, so it's a
14.
lot. But this is not, again, in writing there are no formulas. But I
Yeah,
think that one of the reasons people gets blocked, and then they get to, like, they're waiting for inspiration and motivation and all that, which is wonderful when it comes. Was it, now I'm probably butchering the quote, but was it Picasso that said, that the inspiration better find you writing? Sorry, creating, or in his case, painting,
yeah,
working.
yeah.
Anyway, I did it. I butchered the quote, but
It's
it's
okay. The
better.
principle's there. You're
Yeah,
gonna
the
find the
principles are
inspiration doing the work. Is the
doing the
idea.
work.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So so this is a list that I put together to for people to get one way of seeing the process and learning what at least one screenwriter is doing. So any writer work in a different way. So this is not a formula to use, but I think we always start with an idea. So we have this idea in mind, and so and then um, we try to condense the idea in a log line. A log line
Mm-hmm.
is your story, your film in one sentence. Again, for each of these points, there are a lot of examples where it doesn't work. People are doing it different. So pick what it works for you and what you resonates with you. Try it and then change it. That there are a lot of great movies that cannot be reduced to a single sentence. It would be very hard and uh, and to do that. But
Yeah.
mostly, usually you try to do that also for yourself, for clarity, to find like what is the main concept, what is that thing that when I tell somebody else, I see in their eyes that there's interest, that
Yeah.
there is
It's like
something.
the spark to the fire. The
The
movie is
spark.
the bonfire, and you've just created a spark. But it's enough of a
Exactly.
spark that you know that fire is going to rage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so to do that, usually, because it's not a marketing tool. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it can become that later, but a login for yourself. It's not for anybody else. And then I usually go to an outline, and I try to write the story an outline is basically you pull up a Word document and you just starting to write in prose, and you just go through the film and all the ideas. This is just something as an exploration,
Yeah.
and then without censor, without trying to find
Filter.
perfection, or yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then I focus on six major beats that I think there are like the bones that they give structure to this messy outline that is there. And usually it's like the inciting incident, which is the moment where things in the character's life start like to there's another spark there. Something happens that sets the story in motion, and then the first turning point, which between the siding incident, you get to a point where the character's life is completely turned upside down, and they're in a completely new environment. That can be an internal environment, or it can be like crossing a threshold and getting into a different land or fantasy land or whatever. But it's a complete change, and usually it's a point of no return
Mm-hmm.
when you get there.
Yep.
And then I try to figure out the midpoint, which is this moment where the two opposite views in your story, the philosophical views toward life, they clash somehow. Usually, not always. There are many ways to do this, but usually it's a false victory or a defeat.
Mm-hmm.
If they because if it's a real victory, the movie ends. So it's like the midpoint. Sometimes in many of those writing books, the midpoint and the low point where everything is lost. Sometimes I feel like that we should focus a lot more on those two, and then these all these lost moments is when you're watching a movie and you're there on the edge of your seat and say how in the world they're gonna get out of this situation
Yeah.
that can be eternal. And of course, it gives a lot of gasoline to the rest of the story. Like it gives like the fuel that the story needs, because if you have no idea how the situation is going to be solved, and then usually there's a realization from the main character, and then the second turning point and the climax. But like I put this on a circle, and I divide it
Ah.
into like basically do it in pen and paper.
Yep.
And sometimes, most of the time, I don't have all six. This is not math. This is not paint by the number. This is like what are some tentpoles that I could put there? Like what are some moments? And then I start working in sequences, and this is the fourth
Mm-hmm.
point. It's like 8 sequence approach. Again, you can find a 12 sequence approach, whatever. It doesn't. For me, it's more for you as a writer. It's like crossing the ocean, like swimming through the ocean, and it's a long journey. And if you have these islands in between, at least you have a place where you can get
Yeah.
as a writer before then the structure itself. So, and then I try to turn these 8 sequences into 40 beats.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try, and I'm this is probably me, my personality, but I try to really set some strict rules for me, and with a complete awareness that this is never math. This
Mm-hmm.
is not like, but it gives me like a frame where I write on index cards, and I put them on a corkboard. 10 beats for the first act, 20 beats for the second act, and 10 beats for the third act. This is a pretty common approach that you see
Yeah. It
many
sounds
people.
accurate too.
And so you have at least a map, and also you have when you write a short film, it's very easy to you print it out and you can put it on your desk, and you have this bird eye view when you can like look at it, and the story is there. When it's more than 100 pages, then it becomes confusing. So these cards help you really see the full picture. And I spend probably 80% of my time on the cards, moving them, writing new scenes that come to mind, and all that. And at the same time, I start doing something that I see that it's not as common, and at least I don't see it proposed in the screenwriting books that are most popular, is to force myself to write the story in a single page. I call it the one page. I think it's
Yeah.
something that is very known for marketing and presenting films, but I think it's a great tool for writers as well, because if you force yourself to write in one page, you'll discover that you had a lot of things that you thought they were essential to the film, but they just don't fit. They physically don't fit it on the page. And so you start throwing out stuff, and usually what happens to me that I get clarity on the story and what is the essence. And then I'll go a little quicker because this is a
Yeah. But I'm
long
loving
process.
it. Keep going. Yeah.
And then now I'm adding a third. Now I'm working at the same time. I actually have a board here that I put on a chair. So when I'm writing, I can look at the board and see where I am at with the. I love to work with pen and paper and physical things. I think that
Mm-hmm.
I love technology, but I think that there's something magical about, not magical, but just like this contact with the material, like a bad idea, you throw it in the trash, and you get in the zone. At least for me, it's better to work.
Yeah.
I don't know how is it for you? Like, do you prefer digital? Um,
I work a lot in digital, but there's so many times, especially recently, that I'm just like I've had enough of digital, and so I just turn everything off and go and engage with something real. Pull out a sheet of paper, do a bunch of sketches on blank paper or whatever.
yeah,
And yeah, so I do a combination of both. I really like the iPad because it kind of feels like a combination
yeah,
of the two.
exactly.
But still, there are times where it's like, no, iPad's iPad
Mhm.
needs to go by the side, and let's write on
Yeah.
actual paper.
Yeah, I get the feeling. I'm not an artist, but if you're an artist, it's wonderful to put. You have a written bit, and then you sketch a drawing, and you put that on the board.
Hmm.
It's there. You can do whatever you want. I mean, it's for you. Nobody's gonna, like, you're not gonna turn in your cork board to the
And
producer.
nobody
You're
will
gonna,
care. Nobody will
yeah,
see it.
who
Yeah.
cares? Yeah, and then I start with the treatment, which is telling the story in prose, but with.
No dialogue, right?
Yeah, sometimes then at some point it evolves in a scriptment when some lines of dialogue will appear, and so
Yeah.
I try to gradually, because it's scary for me to just like blank page on the screenwriting software and and just type in there. I think that this
Yeah.
gradual from the 40 beats, then I put in, because at some point this treatment, I copy the treatment and paste it into this screenwriting software. I'm using Writer to do that now, and I put it there, and then I start expanding from that.
Hmm.
It's great. It's a great feeling if you've written a film. The blank page is scary,
Yeah.
and then when you copy and paste your treatment, you already have 12 pages, and
Yeah.
and so I just need to expand this a little bit, and it's really satisfying. And then you can always, you turn description for prose into more visual stuff. You add dialogues, and you start like expanding the script into. And I try to do that's something I see many writers do. Um, the the gross version, to define it, is vomit draft, where you
Yeah.
just throw everything on the page, and it's so liberating in terms of. I remember when you remember I told you about these early conversations on Facebook, and I was chatting with a writer from Lost, the TV series, and somebody that then went on executive producing his own series, and a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
He wrote one of the best episodes, in my opinion, of the series, and he told me, my suggestion is you read this book, and the book was called "Write a Movie in 21 Days." I think what was 21 days or something ridiculous, like something, or
Yeah.
40 days or something like that. I was like, this is the most scammy title I've ever heard about. It's like, come on, really? This is, but I said, of course I'm going to trust you, because I mean, coming from you, I think that I better listen. And so I took the book, and it guides you through the process of writing a vomit draft, basically, which
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
and it's like, shut up your judging mind that
Hmm.
tells you that everything you put on the page is terrible, and just write, and let it flow, especially if you did the work upfront of figuring out your story. It's a great way to start, because otherwise I tried many times before of trying to, this is the beat, I know exactly what a great scene would be, and then you start writing and it's not great, it's terrible, and so then you stop and it's frustrating and you get
Yeah.
into writer's block. And is that the similar experience that you have, or what has it been like for you?
Yeah, one thing I thought of as you talked about writing the treatment before the dialogue is that in story he does talk about how people tend to write dialogue prematurely. But if you write on what's going on inside the characters' heads and what the emotional is and what the things that are happening, then when you go to write dialogue, it's much easier because you really understand like the dynamics of what's going on, and you might not be, one of the first signs when you're watching something that the screenwriting is a little lower quality is when they're talking about everything they're doing. They're just kind of
Yeah.
describing what they're doing as they do it.
Mhm.
So when you've really thought about what the character's going through, then you could make the conversation about anything. Like maybe they come in and they're talking about the weather, but there's so much more depth there.
Subtext. Yeah.
Yeah, there's subtext there, and so yeah, My experience is much like yours. I'm always expanding. I spend a lot of time in the outline stage. I'll write and rewrite that outline
Yeah.
because of in my experience, it's harder to write when you've started to commit yourself to the
Exactly.
more like screenplay format and that sort of thing.
Yes.
So at the same time, like I had this current film that I'm working on now, I had several weeks after I had done the outline a lot, and I was just writing it, and I felt like gold was coming out of my fingertips. Like so that was the feeling. And then several months later, I got to pick it up again because I had more time, and I thought, wow, that gold wasn't quite as gold as I thought it was. But it was great. It was great being able to see it again and say, okay, now let's really actually turn it into something great.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I couldn't have done that if I had been the whole time saying, "Oh, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad." It's like, no, no, just right,
Exactly.
just right.
That's the best feeling, like to write, shut off that voice inside of you that tells you to judge what you need to write. And
Yeah,
to wrap up the list from there, it's fairly simple. It's like, you had this draft, and then rough draft, first draft, second draft, polished draft. And the beauty of animation, at some point, if you're in a team environment, you'll get story artists, and then you
yes,
get to see the animatic, and that is the best part of the process. It hurts at the beginning, but then it's also beautiful to see what they add, what they remove as well, what you entire things that you thought they would work, and
yeah,
that's it. That's amazing. Like one of the films that I've worked on, we just finished, like, I don't know, it's probably 12th animatic, or probably more, like, but major changes is probably the 12th version of it.
hmm
And so, and finally we can see, okay, there's a story there now, things that, and I love how things that used to feel disconnected, they weren't thought to be connected, but then our brain and mind, that's what we do, we connect stuff, and then they feel like, after a lot of rewrites, they feel they were meant to be like that from the very beginning. Like, it's like the
yeah,
idea of, like, oh, this was perfect, and at the beginning it wasn't, it was just there,
yeah.
and there were two
There were
different elements.
disconnected things, and that's kind of how we live life, right? We're
Yep.
trying to find a meaning and connect it together.
Mhm.
And then some people will arrogantly step forward and say, I have life figured out, and here's the ideal political belief and the ideal whatever religious belief or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that you have to stay humble if you're looking for truth,
Mhm.
and you have to say, okay, where where are some things that I hadn't made connections to that maybe are actually more connected than I realized. And yeah, I love that. It's a
Yeah.
great analogy.
Mhm. Yeah, and you touched on something that is, what is your attitude as a writer, and regarding what is true for you. Like writing, many writers would agree that writing is about finding the truth, but it's not imposing that to your story, because we all have ideas about what truth is, but
Hmm
it's like, let the story reveal that to you. And so that is,
Yeah.
like, we had a live session. We have like a group of people. We call it the Right for Animation Academy. It's a fancy name, but it's really like, we get together over Zoom once a month. And
yeah.
and one of the questions that came up in one of the sessions was about, like, a lady that she was feeling very bad about not being able to find out the theme of the story. What is the message? And
hmm
I love how Pete Doctor always says, "What are you giving the audience to bring home? What is the thing they're thinking about when they're in the car after they watch the film in the theater or streaming, whatever?" But they what is that sensation? And I think that forcing yourself to find that early on in your film, it's a terrible mistake, because then there are two options. One, you get frustrated because it's really hard to know that before,
Yeah.
or the opposite is, it feels like almost preachy or
hmm
propaganda. It's
Yeah.
like, you're trying to tell a message. I want young kids to, it's never the good approach. If you
Yeah.
let your characters reveal themselves, let the story find, because the story comes from your heart. So at some point, what you're gonna find on the page is a mirror of what you're discovering. And I
Yeah.
think that is really beautiful. And I know that you also approach story like trying to find something meaningful, something
hmm
something that is more than just
Yeah.
entertainment.
And in my case, I do think I often, even when I'm cutting up the log line nowadays, I'm like, uh I see the tip of the iceberg of meaning is kind of what I see. And I'm like, I know it's there, and then I'm just continually moving down into the ocean, exploring the
Yeah,
edges and the inside of this iceberg.
yeah.
And it sounds like we're already actually touching on the final question that I always ask in this interview, which is how do we get the deepest concentration of meaning into a story? And yeah, I think that's it. It's going past what you think you believe. I think if you have the same beliefs when you finish writing a story as when you began, that's just a disservice to yourself as a human.
Mm-hmm.
You need to grow, right? And also to the
Yes.
audience, because very quickly, especially if you're on the opposite side of a big group, like maybe a political group or whatever that believes completely differently, they won't feel heard or seen or anything in that story. Whereas if you get all the perspectives in the room and you have them all hash it out, you're going to have a lot stronger of a meaning.
Yes, to question everything and to go to the very deep. I think is digging into yourself as well. What are your doubts? What are your fears? What are your the more personal, the more universal your story will be, and the more authentic the theme will be, because it's something, it's human nature. That's why, I mean, it will resonate even if it has we've seen it. We see some beautiful themes, specifically very specific about a culture, a place, a different language, and they resonate with the entire world.
Yes.
And so I think that is never try to chase the market. That's a terrible mistake. And really dig into what is something you're not telling people. There's something so private, something that made you suffer. What is something that there's the one exercise that I would like to share with the who's listening, is that something I've learned from a teacher at NIFA, and she asked us to write a list of what are the 5 films that we would watch over and over and over. If somebody's watching those on Netflix, you walk into the room, they're it's probably half the way through the movie, you sit down with them, you want to watch it. And the only problem with this exercise, especially in our circle, is that we usually tend to put our filmmaker hat. So I would never say that I watched, I don't know, the Smurfs movie 3 or whatever, or that romantic comedy that is so cheesy that I would be embarrassed. We need to really be honest. Nobody's going to look at your list, but be honest. And they don't need to be animated. They don't need to be acclaimed movies. And once you do that list, try to see what the protagonist is going through in an internal way. Jurassic Park is not about dinosaurs. Of course, it's about dinosaurs. It's a great movie about dinosaurs, but there's a theme from the protagonist that is way deeper than that, and is more human. And so, and this for many movies that we think we love because of the great spectacle they put on the screen. But if you do that list and then you think, okay, what is the main character going through? And usually you find some theme that is, at least on most of them, that really deeply resonates with you. It's like 2 chords on a guitar, and you strike one and the other one vibrates. It's like there's this connection that's specific to you. That's especially when you cry, when you feel really emotional, and sometimes that can be this. Some people cried in the lesson when at school when they taught that. And
cool.
And I discovered something about myself that I thought was very interesting. And the thing that if you do that, then write about that. That will make it more authentic and meaningful, and dig into that, because if it makes you emotional, there's a reason for that.
That's really cool. And the great news is that even though we're ending right now, the live cast, you can follow Pietro on Write for Animation on Instagram and his YouTube channel, which is also Write for Animation. At the same time, we're going to actually stop the recording here, but we're going to continue the recording so that Pietro has content for his YouTube channel that he can put on there of our further discussion of story and our passion for that. So be on the lookout for that. And anything else you'd like to add before we go?
I want to thank you, Scott. This has been amazing. I will chat with you for hours. We'll keep we'll keep going, and you'll see that on our channel. And I love what you do. I really love the content on your channel. I think that people are going to learn a lot, and I want to thank everybody that stayed until the end and watched this. Hopefully it was helpful somehow, and thank you again.
Yes, thank you. We have an awesome audience, so thank you, audience. All right, until next time, I hope we all get a little wiser. Thank you for watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser, audio version edited by Kira Horowitz, copyright Scott Weiser LLC 2022. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and ring that notification bell.